God said he named the stars, and he called them out by name.
In this study, we will be looking at the book of Revelation through the eyes of the New Jerusalem temple.
And you've never heard anything like this in your life.
Revelation chapter 21. And I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. This doesn't mean that there will be no more seas within the earth. It's speaking of the Dead Sea, which will not be on the new earth. And then it says, I, John, saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. We understand that this is something that we're able to see within the celestial heavens as well. And this is something that we're needing to take a look at as we're supposed to be seeing the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven. The New Jerusalem is supposed to be the heavens themselves. We're going to see the essence of that which is seen within the heaven, which is the pyramid model that is supposed to be coming down to the earth. We can also say this is the tabernacle of the heavens, which we're going to see will be four square. It says, I heard a great voice saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. The macroprosopis was supposed to be, according to the Zohar, talks about that it has a tear that runs down to the sea. And that would actually be the river of the Jordan, if we're picturing the macroprosopis as being this large face, which was the area of land of the tribes of Israel, the 10 tribes, the tribes of Ephraim, that are referred to as Ephraim or Israel, were separated from the tribes of Judah. And Isaiah said, your head is sick, even down to the sole of your feet. And we picture this macroprosopis as being the head dealing with the 10 tribes, and the neck would be, therefore, Judah. It says of Judah, thou art the stiff neck, and that would be the 3 tribes that were under the banner of Judah. So what we're picturing there is that in the Zohar, it's speaking of that this macroprosopis is something that cannot really be seen, like the microprosopis, which actually has a mold of a head in Jerusalem. The macroprosopis is merely an idea on the map of the tribes that are divided. And in the concept here, when Isaiah speaks of it, he's speaking of Israel as being kind of like onto a foot. And he says, your name is an ointment, therefore, and that the ointment is poured forth. And the name El-Al is supposed to speak of the mighty God above and over, and that is a seal by the Dead Sea, which would be at the base of the foot. Interesting in ancient customs that they speak of the essence of the kingdom, meaning this point of hell as well, but the kingdom also means the base of the foot. And in the ancient customs, if a man would show his foot onto somebody, it was likened unto saying, go to hell. So this would support it, although we're seeing the foot idea is really just barely the idea of an outline of Israel. It's just a concept, but the head being sick onto the sole of the foot, your name is an ointment there poured forth, and that ointment will be for the healing of Israel. Then it says, verse 5, and he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said, Write these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is thirsty a fountain of the water of life freely. It's really supposed to be standing for Christ, but we understand that Orion, whose Hebrew name is Cecil, meaning the fool, is the fool that shows pictures of the bridegroom. And we're supposed to picture in the apparent travel of the sun that Orion is being raised up as the king. Orion has from the hilt of his belt a sword, and the tip of that sword is the Orion Nebula, which has a picture of an ox and a ram The Hebrew word for ox is aleph, and the Hebrew word for the ram or lamb would be ta. In Greek, it is the alpha and the omega. Alpha means ox, and omega would be the altar. Aries, the lamb, was also called Baraziger, meaning the righteous altar. And this has to do with that the four horns of Aries and Taurus make up the four horns of the incense altar. And the Pleiades within the center was supposed to be the representation of the 7 sprinklings that was to be placed upon the altar. And also from the Dead Sea. And it says, he that overcometh shall inherit all things. I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable, and the murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars have their part in the lake which is burned with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Scripture also said, who is a liar but he who says that Christ has not come in the flesh? We see that the Antichrist will be a liar, saying that he is the Messiah, and therefore he will be stating that Christ did not raise up. I believe he will be saying that he is the one who is the Christ, and that he is the one who didn't die on the cross and be raised up, but is lying in the area of the tabernacle, which is the mount next to the Dead Sea, which is, it's kind of a mountain hill, which is next to the Mount of Jerusalem. Then it says in verse 9, and there came unto me one of the 7 angels, verse 9. And then it says, and there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me into the spirit of the great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. I believe that we're speaking of the angel of Orion, who is really the one who is having to deal with all of these things. And when it's speaking of the angel of Orion, he is standing with his right hand, it says in Revelation, his right hand has the 7 stars. It's actually to his right hand are the 7 stars of the Pleiades, and Manly Hall refers to these as the vials. And so he's speaking of the Lamb's wife. It says, he carried me away in the spirit to a great high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even a jasper stone, clear and crystal. This, I believe, is the precious cornerstone, which is supposed to be made of sapphire, but one text tells us that while the top is sapphire, the bottom is jasper, and jasper is believed to be a diamond. And when it said, and had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and the gates of 12 angels, and the names written on them, and the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. This, I believe, is speaking of the heavenly testimony that we also see, and the 12 gates are said to be the 12 constellations that are within the zodiac. These 12 constellations are supposed to be the testimony of the 12 tribes of Israel. In fact, that Jacob once saw himself as this king, and when he died, who was surrounded by the 12 tribes. Reuben was the waterman, was represented as being Aquarius, and here we see a picture of a man having water that is being poured out. Simeon and Levi, according to the Masonic handbook, were supposed to be the bands of Pisces. Judah is supposed to be the lion of the tribe of Judah, and one of the prophecies of the lion of the tribe of Judah would be that as a young lion, he is crouched down. As an old lion, who shall raise him up? And we see that Orion is holding up this essence of the lion of the tribe of Judah, and we're supposed to be picturing the lion of the tribe of Judah being raised up, that he will, as the smoke of the incense, being raised up into the celestial heavens to be the king. So this is the idea of how Orion is supposed to be, as part of this incense, the one who will be the essence of the one who is the Lion of the tribe of Judah that shall leap over a wall. And we are seeing that the picture of Aries and of Taurus makes a wall, but he leaps over the wall in the form of the incense. We find in the Christian zodiac that they see Orion is not holding the lion. Instead, he is holding a censer to represent the incense. So we understand this lion is supposed to be a representation of the incense. We also know that the words within the testimony of the incense has to do with stacte, oncha, frankincense, and galbanum, and these words actually translate to the rather obscure idea of a cerulean mussel rising up out of the sea as a roaring lion. So the words themselves of the ingredients of the incense are telling you that this lion is to be raised up, and a cerulean mussel was supposed to be a representation of this death and resurrection. The mussels would have a representation of death and resurrection, but the cerulean mussel was unique in that it was one that after it would leave its shell, which was a representation of death, that it would continue to eat, but not to preserve its own life. We understand that Jesus ate after he was raised up, raised up from death, but not to preserve his own life. Where there may have been others, such as Lazarus, raised from the dead, and the people that were shown of the saints that after Christ died that had been raised up, only Christ is the one who continued to eat, but not to preserve his own life. And it said, and he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, and the light which was in this light onto the stone, most precious crystal. And then it goes on and talks about verse 13, and on the east 3 gates, and on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. We understand that the tabernacle that was located at Gilgal had the representation on the north, south, east, and west. These are the 4 major tribes: the Lion of Judah, the Ox of Ephraim, the man which was Aquarius to be Reuben, and the eagle, which was supposed to be the symbol of the tribe of Dan. That being like unto the heavenly testimony. In fact, Gilgal is from the word Gilgalum, which was supposed to be representing the heavens themselves. And also the circular plane of Gilgal was a representation of the zodiac, which was above. As is above, so is below. In verse 14, it's the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. This would be continued apparently to be speaking of the 12 signs of the zodiac, which will also be symbols then of the 12 apostles of Christ. And it said, and he talked with me, and had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And we understand that Orion is the one who was said to have a rod like unto a reed, who was said, rise and measure the temple. And so we actually see that Orion is the one who had the key of life to get out of the pit, and he does rise. And the word measure the temple means to met out the temple. So we picture that he would be the one that we're speaking of as this one who is measuring the celestial temple. And it says, and the city lieth 4 and the length was as large as his breadth. He measured the city with a reed, 1,000 cubits furlongs, and the length and the breadth of the height and the height of it are equal. Celestially, this would be representing a cube, which would be the zodiac, but also we would see within Jerusalem, this is supposed to represent a larger area of land for Jerusalem than it has now. It goes on, verse 17, and it says, and he measured the wall thereof, and 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is of the angel. And the building of the wall of it was of jasper, and the city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third a chalcedony, and the fourth of emerald, the fifth of sardonyx, the sixth sardius, and the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th a chrysoprasus, and the 11th a jacinth, and the 12th of an amethyst. And the 12 gates were the 12 pearls. Every gate was one of pearl. The street of the city was pure gold, as it were translucent glass. I believe this is speaking of the celestial heavens, because Manly Hall stated that the 12 gates that were of pearls were really the 12 constellations within the celestial heavens, but it may have an application to the earth as well. One thing interesting is that we're speaking of 12 precious stones, and each of the tribes of Israel had precious stones that were on the breastplate of the high priest, and these precious stones may be the things that we're seeing also as being the 12 constellations within the celestial heavens. We'll also see that Aquarius has the definitions that would apply to the high priest, that in the little meaning of the high priest and his breastplate, it actually tells you that he has water pouring out over his thigh, and we see that within this picture of Aquarius, and also Aquarius seems to have a breastplate of the zodiac itself crossing over his chest. So we could picture this as being a representation of the high priest as well, and of the 12 tribes of Israel that are supposed to be seen as well. Interesting to note that in the tribe of Dan was the only tribe that when you would look into his symbol of the gemstone, that you would see yourself upside down. And this, I believe, has to do with the essence of this face, that is that Dan shall be the judge, and it's the idea of bringing forth this face, which is seen upside down, that Isaiah said, surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as potter's clay. And he speaks of the face of Jacob that will not wax pale, and this has to do with this face as well. Next it says in verse 22, and I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is, I believe we're speaking of Christ here. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. And the gate of it shall not be shut at all by the day, for there shall be no night there, and they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it, and therefore shall in no wise enter into it in anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life.